Happy January Town Hall, everybody. If we have not met, I am Maggie. I'm the Community Product Manager for DataHub. Super excited to have you all with us again and to share some of the latest and greatest of what's been going on. We're also going to hear from a wonderful community member. So let's go ahead and kick things into gear. All right, so today I'm going to start things off with our regular community update, but I'm also going to give a walkthrough of our roadmap. Shirshanka will dig into some of the details of what's to come there as well. We're going to hear from Ada from Notion and some of the work that they're doing over there with DataHub. Then we're also going to review a community contribution to some improvements to our documentation resources. Which is really exciting. I'm really excited for us to dig into that one. And then we're going to start talking about efforts we have underway to simplify DataHub. And today, I'm actually optimistic that this time we will have some time left over for Q&A. I have said that in the past, and every time I say that, it doesn't happen. But I think today's the day for us to have some Q&A. All right, so let's dig into DataHub community updates. We are just shy of 6,000 people in our Slack. I was thinking about this morning. I think I was Slack member number like 63 or something in 2020, 2021, 2020.
I think 2020. I think 2020.
2020. The fact that we are at 6,000 people, I can't wrap my head around it. And it's magnificent. I'm so happy to have you all with us. The Slack community is as active as ever. We're still seeing around that 1,000 weekly active users. So those are folks who are coming in, joining conversations, helping each other out. Just shy of 6,000 messages posted in the last month. This is a little bit lower than what we've seen, but it's also the holiday season, so I'm not terribly surprised by that. But if you are not in our Slack community and if you want to get involved, it's just a super vibrant and active space. People are so welcoming and so supportive. I highly recommend joining us there. One of the things we like to do as a group every town hall is to take a look at our support volume. So these are the questions that are coming in and the community contributions that are coming in. So on a monthly basis, or just kind of looking over the last 8 months from our GitHub, from our repo, we're averaging around 53 PRs coming in per week. We're actually merging those at a really quick rate. We've had some really concerted efforts on the maintainer side to really start to move through those PRs and make sure that when you are contributing, you have the attention that you need from the team to make sure that that code is shipped. So really awesome to see that continued volume and high velocity of PRs coming through. From a community support standpoint, we're still seeing around 600 messages per week. This is consistent with what we've seen before. And this is a place where I like to say, or I like to remind folks that if you're in the community, if you're in the Slack community, if you're able to jump in and help folks by answering questions, giving some troubleshooting tips, some pointers, it helps our core team so much, really turn our focus or keep our focus on making sure that we're building and shepherding through those contributions. So the more that you can help out, the more that we appreciate it. And we just want to make sure that it's a really welcoming and supportive collective space there. Paul, I will kick this one over to you if you want to speak to our upcoming workshop.
Yeah, sure, Maggie. So we have a beginner's workshop for BigQuery that is coming in about 2 weeks. That'll be happening 2 weeks from now on, I believe, Thursday, February the 9th. This will be a workshop geared towards people who haven't yet ingested stuff with BigQuery and are just looking for a little extra help. We'll be walking through one of our guides there, and yeah, we'll be looking forward to it. There'll be limited seats, so please, once we send out that link, get on it and join right away.
Yep, and we will we'll send information out via our newsletter, so you'll get that in your inbox if you're subscribed to the newsletter. Also keep an eye on announcements in Slack. We'll send out the details there. This is a series that we've done 2 rounds of this. We've done 1 session for BigQuery so far, 1 session for Snowflake. We've had really great attendance. If there's anything you'd like to see, kind of like a hands-on workshop, feel free to reach out to me and Paul. We'd love to hear your ideas so we can make sure that we're providing supportive and relevant resources for you in that way. All right, a couple of just like general announcements of some content that you might want to engage with. I believe it was last week, time flies, I think it was last week, I hosted an AMA around data contracts with our own Shirshanka and Chad Sanderson. We dug into kind of like clearly defining why do we care about data contracts, also concretely, what are they? And then where do they start to fit within data stacks? I know that I personally learned a lot in that hour. So if you are interested in taking a look at that, you'll see Shirshanka's very happy data contract smile there. The link is in the deck. We'll be sure to share this out after the presentation, but also you can just find it by going to our YouTube channel. We have a couple of in-person conferences starting up. So we're kind of like kicking off conference season once again. Shirshanka is going to be speaking this Saturday at Data Day in Texas. So if you are joining that, please feel free to reach out to us. We always love to meet folks in person. And speaking of in-person events, we are also going to be in Austin we're going to be in Texas again in March for Data Council. I'm actually a track host for this one. I'm hosting a track specifically on community and data culture. So not only building a community around a product, but also kind of building a culture internally around data. So how do you start to pull in other stakeholders or other folks to build that really robust data culture there? So if you're going to be there, again, we're going to be sending out some announcements. We should have a discount code coming soon for discounted tickets. We're also going to be trying to organize some in-person events. So if you are there, even if you just happen to live in Texas and you want to come see us, you don't have to go to the conference, but let us know. We'd love to meet up. Last town hall. So earlier in January, we announced our Data Practitioners Guild. So this is a space for us to really celebrate high impact and highly engaged folks within our community. This round, we are focusing on folks that are contributing, that they're top code contributors. They're providing outstanding support to other community members, and then also championing DataHub within their own networks and across platforms. So if you've not taken a look there, I highly recommend going over to datahubproject.io/guild and get to know these wonderful humans and the work that they've done to really genuinely move this project and this community forward. Another shout out is to the team over at You Can Games. Lisa Stevens just published a blog post on our community blog about how she and her team have used DataHub to really start cleaning up a lot of honestly kind of like tech debt or data debt of unused data resources within their stack. It is a fascinating read. Highly recommend checking that out. And thanks to Lisa and team for contributing that back to the blog. Speaking of our blog, if you're interested in, I'm plugging a lot of things, I realize that. If you're interested in contributing to the DataHub blog, we have a channel in our Slack. I believe it's DataHub Community Blog. Join us there. We can talk through it and we'll make sure that we can support you along the way. In terms of providing community support, we like to give a shout out to all of the wonderful humans who are going above and beyond in the last month or so. So big thanks, of course, XL is our hands-on supporter through and through. We also have Steve, AMZ, and Tim going above and beyond to help us out. So again, thank you. This, like I said earlier, this really helps us free up time on the core teams, just in our day-to-day in the core for the core team. That way we can focus on shipping really impactful products and also shepherding through contributions as well. Alrighty, let's talk DataHub roadmaps. So first, before we dig into what we're going to do in in Q1 of 2023, wanted to do a quick recap of our recent contributions just for January. So in January, we merged 184 PRs across our main DataHub project and DataHub Helm. We had 27 contributors in one release, so that was 096. We also had a patch release following that with 961. But big shout out to our first time contributors. We had 8 new folks contributing there, and 29. I'm realizing that these numbers don't add up. We had 27 contributors across the board. Apologies for that one. In terms of project updates, so like our highlights from that release, we are now supporting embedded Looker dashboards and Tableau and Mode. Just basically, if there's a dashboarding system that you're integrated with, you can now embed, if they have an embed functionality, you can now embed those resources within DataHub itself. From an integration side, we had a bunch of really great contributions from the community, specifically our Postgres ingestion now supports omitting lineage edges between views. Our Snowflake ingestion supports extracting tags. We have some improvements to the Vertica ingestion. And then likewise, the Glue ingestion now omits an S3 lineage edge for data that's written with the S3 or S3N client. So again, all 4 of those were community contributions. Really, really appreciate it there. There's a ton in here and we have a ton to cover. So I'm gonna move through. I'm just gonna move on to the next part of it. But this is all captured in our release notes, so you can take a look at that as well. So let's talk Q1 2023. From a user experience standpoint, we have 2 main initiatives that we're going to be kicking off. One is focused on discovery around how we can improve the browse experience. So this is really focused on understanding kind of like the common search or the common ways or the workflows that folks go through when they're browsing for entities within DataHub. In 2022, if you've been following along, we did a lot of improvements around our actual search experience. So searching for specific entity types or specific keywords. But we want to kind of shift away from that keyword search and more just kind of the browse and navigating groups of entities. So I'm going to be teaming up with Brittany, who's our new designer that we welcomed, in December. And this will inform what we build out in future cycles. Separately, we are going to be introducing the ability to subscribe to an entity and send notifications via Slack. So this is a highly requested feature from our community. And the idea is that we want to be able to make it easy for folks to understand when something has changed with an entity. That way you can, take advantage of that real-time, metadata management. So we are excited to ship that one for you guys. From an ingestion standpoint, we have one concrete ingestion source that we're going to be working on, and that's going to be a partnership with Fivetran. We also have 2, again, discovery initiatives, and I'm emphasizing discovery here because this will be something where we're doing a lot of outreach within the community, and that will truly inform what we build. So your feedback will be really, really impactful there. So we'll be looking at how we can make some improvements around earn casing. So it's just kind of a technical, like an implementation detail, but then also looking at our error reporting to make it easier to debug ingestion issues when you are working on getting metadata ingested into DataHub. From a developer experience standpoint, we are going to be open sourcing a functionality to propagate tags and terms between entities. What does that mean? The action will be, so it's more of like a backend implementation. And what's going to happen is when you have entities that are connected by lineage, so dataset A is connected to dataset B, you can configure basically copying terms and glossary terms and tags if applied to one or the other so that they are copied between the 2 of them. So the idea there is, really just kind of like minimizing redundancy in any of that tagging. And this is really just kind of a step towards that propagation journey. And so we're concretely starting with tags and terms. The other thing is that we're continuing to make improvements to our search relevance. This is both just kind of from like a scalability standpoint, so pagination, to support a higher volume of entities, but then also just improvements to search ranking, autocomplete, surfacing related entities, etc. All right, so that's I forgot to put the roadmap view in here, but this is public. All the details on this are public in our roadmap portal. I'll be sure to link that out in Slack when we share out the recording. One other thing is that we are working closely with the Stripe team. So if you were at Town Hall a few months ago, if you saw this on our YouTube channel, the Stripe team has done an amazing amount of customization within their own instance to understand observability and kind of SLA tracking for data pipelines. So we're working closely with them to actually have them contribute that functionality back into the project. So this is something where we are not, the central team is not the ones driving the implementation, but we're really shepherding that through so that we can make sure that contribution is made available for folks in the community. All right, Shirshanka, let's talk data products. And again, this is still in our Q, we're still talking Q1 roadmap. So Shirshanka, I'll hand it over to you for data products, contracts, schemas, et cetera.
Cool. Hey, everyone. One of the things that we love to do is have the community actually tell us what's important and what needs to get built out. And one of the things that happened early on, actually in even 2020, was Saxo Bank did a data mesh implementation. And as part of that, they used DataHub as their data discovery layer. And then fast forward to August of 2022, there was a lot of interest in the community for having data products as an entity in the metadata model. And so Maggie created the design data product entity channel back in August of 2022, less than 6 months ago, saying, hey, let's get a few interested folks together. And then conversations started happening. So the next thing that happened was, Maggie, next. Ray dropped in and said, hey, I've got some ideas, and here's my plan, here's my proposal. And he had a beautiful picture of how he would integrate data products into the existing data model. And then fast forward a few more months, Eric showed up and said, hey, Ray, this is great, but I have some other additions to this idea, and here's what I think, and I'm working on this idea in a fork. And would love to get feedback. And then, there were a lot of conversations about it. And then Stefan showed up recently and he said, well, I've been studying data mesh and I've got, a full-on entity relationship model built out. And here's what I'm planning to publish, but I would love to share it with the community as well. So it's pretty cool to see all of these conversations happening async, people around the world kind of contributing and collaborating together to come up with what does a shared data product standard almost look like on top of DataHub's metadata model. And so I've taken the lead in creating an RFC that tries to collect all of the feedback that we've gotten so far and created an RFC to capture the discussion so far. And I'm going to be maintaining it going forward. And the plan really is to use the best ideas that we've got coming from the community, people who are actually implementing data products and data mesh at their companies, and create a data model that actually makes sense, that is practical and works for our community members. So that's happening. So stay tuned for that, data products. At the same time, there have been other discussions happening around schemas as a top-level entity. So back in, I think, September, I opened an RFC to start kind of the community discussion around this, because people have often found that while data sets are important and topics and tables and dashboards and all of these are important, schemas, logical schemas, have their own kind of place in the metadata model. And there have been a lot of proposals for actually including schemas as a top-level entity as well. So there's another RFC open that discusses what should a schema model look like in DataHub. And then fast forward a little further, as Maggie just said, we recently had a conversation around data contracts in the community. So Maggie, if you want to hit next. And what does a data contract look like? I mean, just a sneak peek of an example data contract that someone might write, maybe something in YAML where you give the name of a data contract and maybe you define a schema for the entity using kind of a logical language like JSON schema or something like that. And inside the schema language, you define validation rules, things like range that you want to check, not nulls, the standard stuff. And then you might define what data sets you want to cover with that data contract. And maybe you want to add additional quality rules. This is kind of roughly where the industry is in terms of thinking about what a data contract looks like. And then when you think about how a data contract actually needs to be provisioned and deployed and how it actually fits with the rest of the data stack, as we talk about what the industry is coalescing around, we seem to be aligning around an architecture that looks like using Git as a repository for these data contracts, and then having a CI/CD pipeline deploying this into a contract registry. Now, of course, we think DataHub is a perfect example of something that could serve as a contract registry. And then downstream of the contract registry are essentially operators that are enforcing the contract and monitoring the contract and making sure that the data assets that are being covered by the data contracts are actually healthy and up to date. So why is this all related? Why is this all interesting to talk about together? Well, if you think about it, and I've been looking at kind of the data models and how people are thinking about these things, it's actually quite interesting. These are highly related concepts. A data product, when people talk about data products, is often one for one or one to many with a data set, a logical data set, or a physical data set. Data contracts often cover one or more data sets. Data sets often have one or more schemas. And similarly, data products themselves could have 0 or more schemas. And so if you look at kind of all of our conversations that have happened across a bunch of different Slack threads and even these RFCs, we're all trying to achieve similar outcomes, which is data products, schemas, data sets, data contracts. They're all kind of related. They need to be sort of thought through together. And then we can do very interesting things once we've got all of these things added to the metadata model, which is we can move towards a world of declarative data management. And I think that's what we're seeing emerge as a pattern that everyone is excited about. You can define what you want to exist, whether it's a data product or a data contract or a schema, and then you can have individual operators that are working on your data stack that are making those things real. So you might have a data discovery engine that is making all of this available for the data consumer or the data producer to discover. You might have a data quality engine that is actually operating on the quality rules that are defined in data contracts and then reporting results back. You could have access provisioning systems that are, again, driven by this declarative data artifacts, or you could have data lake systems that are implementing retention. And we think that DataHub is ideally positioned to function as a sort of metadata registry where these declarative data management specifications can be registered and then trigger actions which could actually activate, these individual operators. These could be data quality engines, access provisioning systems, retention management systems, which would then report all of this metadata back. Things like this data quality check failed, or access was provisioned, or retention was enabled. And you would have a single overused term, glass pane, to actually manage all of your data in one place and be able to actually see how everything is getting done while applying software engineering practices, not just to writing your DBT models, but in managing your entire data ecosystem. So I know it's a big idea, but I think we've kind of been working towards it in baby steps all this while. And what we would love to see the community help us with is, one, collaborate on the data model with us. The bunch of RFCs open, please give us your feedback. We are actually going to be making a lot of these things part of the metadata model. They'll all obviously be attached to Git developer workflows that would be coming that actually create these things, provision these things, et cetera, help give us feedback on what looks like an ideal ergonomic workflow for you. And then finally, build the actions that integrate with your favorite tools. It might be running a data quality check. It might be provisioning access. It might be setting up retention in your warehouse. The sky is the limit in terms of all of the different things you can do with an architecture like this. And we're really excited to kind of make this a real thing in 2023. And of course, we're going to be making real progress towards this picture reference architecture in Q1 of this year. So
amazing.
That's kind of the idea. This is also a sneak peek into the talk that I'm going to be giving in a couple of days, which is, labeled In Search of the Control Plane of Data. So looking forward to seeing if this architecture resonates with all of you and if this is something you're all kind of trying to get to with how you manage your data and organize your data assets. So would love to collaborate, and we'll take the rest of the conversation on Slack.
All right. Thank you. Thanks so much, Shirshanka. So like I said, this is all part of our Q1 2023 plan. So I do think this is a very interesting and exciting shift for the community where a lot of our focus this quarter is going to be on discovery and collaboration within the community. And so super excited to be collaborating with you folks. I know there's some questions in chat. Shirshanka, if you could take a look there, we can get those answered. And let's keep moving things along. We are going to hand things over to Ada from Notion. Ada, welcome to our town hall, and I will hand it over to you.
Thank you. Let me share my screen here. Slideshow, cool. Okay, hi all. My name is Draginda, and I'm a staff data engineer at Notion. And I want to share some of the work that I've been doing on automating the propagation of metadata, including tags. So it's really interesting hearing and exciting to hear that like tag propagation is coming. I'm doing some of this by using scripts. So here's like a boiled down version of like what we're trying to do. So we have some metadata that describe our data sets. Things like, is this data set exposed externally? Is this driving metrics? And we want to use that metadata to come up with a priority tag to say like, like this is a higher priority data set that needs to be like triaged if there's an issue. So we take that information, that metadata, calculate a priority, and then set that priority as a custom property on our DataHub dataset and tag it. But as part of that, upstream dependencies of that table should also reflect that same metadata. So like in this case, we have this upstream table and it doesn't drive company metrics. And so it had a lower priority, but because that table is used to derive the other table, we want to bump it up. We also want to separate the fact that that is like an inferred or like implied requirement for that table. So we want to like separate that metadata out. So we're keeping track of like, what is this data set actually used for? And what does its downstream dependencies need from it? So see like how I did this automatically. So what's needed? I'm going to need to get the metadata from our models. We're using dbt. So we'll need the metadata from the model. We'll need the upstream dependencies. We need to fetch the current metadata from DataHub. We'll need to be able to write that metadata back and add and remove tags. Now, fortunately, dbt gives us the first two automatically. We could probably use DataHub as well to get the upstream dependencies with lineage somehow. I didn't look into that, but it was just available in dbt, so I just used that. So those two things are covered, but the other three, we don't have anything for that. So I went to the wonderful API, which gives all this functionality. So you can get the metadata out by searching for the entity. I used the Python emitter to send the metadata back. And then there's this add remove tags endpoint. But it's actually like a lot of boilerplate code when it all went together. And this is just like a slice of some of the things that we're trying to do. So I've bundled it all together into a little open source project that's available here, hosted by Notion, that covers, so it's like a subset of the full API. I only covered the parts that we needed, but maybe it's still of use to people. And then here's how, like a skeleton of the code that actually does that work. So I go and get the dbt resources, I get the DataHub entries, and I have a little custom class there to make it easier to work with the entities, and that's in that open source project. Then I go through the entities, match it with the data, with the dbt models, calculate the priority tag, get the existing priority tag, and then there's like some business logic to decide like whether or not we should change the tag, add it, or remove it. Then I get the existing metadata, combine it with the new metadata and emit it if needed. There should be an if in there. And then finally, batch set and remove the tags, since there's like a batch endpoint. So like for a given tag, set it for all of these resources, which is why I do it this way instead of one at a time. Yeah, so thank you so much for making the API easy to work with, and hopefully that my little open source project makes that easier for other people. If you go in, take a look at the repo, there's an examples folder which has like the full gory details of how all of this works. And it also has a little bonus example of like a script I wrote to like automate putting in like a little header at the top of each of our dbt models. It goes through the dbt manifest reads in the SQL and then adds a little header at the top that gives you a link to the DataHub page. And we found that extremely useful for people so that when they're working with the source code, they can just jump right to the DataHub page. And that's in there too. That's as part of the package. Cool, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so, so much. We do have, so Nadine, I know you have your hand raised. I'm going to ask that we keep questions for the end or put them in chat. That way we can keep going because we have 3 more sessions left, but we definitely want to make sure that we address any questions you might have. All right, thank you so much, Ada. It's really, really exciting to see ways that folks are starting to like really operationalize a lot of these things, right? And really leverage the API to really, we're talking a lot about shifting left, right? Managing all of that metadata annotation at the source. So really, really appreciate you joining us today. All right, let's head over to Professor Collins with the
Don't forget. Oh my gosh.
with an update.
All right, cool. Let me share my screen. Cool. Can you see my slideshow all right?
Yep, you're all good to go.
Nice. All right. Hey, everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about the improvements that have been made to our documentation editor. But just as important, I'll be discussing the collaboration process that we underwent with the amazing grad team who made this new feature a reality. So let's get on into it. So a few months ago, the grad team, including wonderful Amanda and Harvey, approached us with a project idea. They wanted to make a pretty major contribution to DataHub by replacing our documentation editor. We'd been hearing feedback for some time that our editor was lacking, shall I say, but we hadn't quite, prioritized it because there was a lot of other projects that we were trying to tackle, but we knew that it was important anyways. So after they approached us, we agreed this would just be the perfect fit to have a project that we collaborate on, as it's a pretty heavy lift. We wanted to say in the design and outcome, but we, like I said, didn't have time to do it ourselves in the short term. I'll talk a little more about what the collaboration process looked like here in a sec. But first, why exactly did they want to make updates to the documentation editor? For any of you that have used our editor before, you may not be surprised by this change. But for those unfamiliar, the grad team had been hearing a lot of feedback that our editor was difficult to use. It required at least some familiarity with Markdown, which is off-putting for a lot of users, as you can imagine. The side-by-side editing experience was confusing and frustrating. Most people want and expect a what you see is what you get editor nowadays. And it also lacked a lot of functionality that was desired in a rich text editor. I'll dive deeper into how nice this new editor here is in a little bit. You can see on the bottom here a quick comparison between the old on the left and the new experience on the right. So now I'll talk a little bit about what the collaboration process looked like between the grad team and us. I'll just say right now, collaborating with the grad team was an absolute pleasure. I think our process was smooth, it was easy to repeat, and definitely something we could bring to projects in the future. First, we set up a few weekly and then bi-weekly meetings to establish some goals, outline the scope of the project, and then check in on progress. After we'd established what we thought we were trying to accomplish, we discussed technical design. So would this require a new aspect? What format would we store the documentation in the database? How are we going to be backwards compatible with existing documentation? If we store documentation in a different format, would that break anyone's existing workflows? For the last question, we decided to go out to the community and ask around, which I think is another great example of how awesome you guys are and informing decisions that we make with the product. And we actually discovered that a lot of people do rely on the documentation being stored as Markdown in the database, as they use that and query for it in outside APIs. And so they use that outside of DataHub even. This is great to know and informed our decision to continue storing this as Markdown. So after all the goals and design questions had been settled, the grad team went out and they just built this thing. It was pretty awesome. Honestly, the final part of the process was just them putting up a really awesome PR. We reviewed it, QA'd it, went back and forth a little bit, and then we just merged that guy right on in there. Honestly, we couldn't be more happy with how this whole thing turned out. So again, I can't say this enough. Shout out to the grad team, specifically Amanda and Harvey. They were amazing. You guys rock. I'll also say the only reason that they're not here talking with you all right now is due to some busyness and highly deserved time off around the holidays. But all right, without further ado, let's check out this new doc editor together, shan't we? So we're going to go to the Snowflake table called pets.
Let's check out the documentation. Pretty weak, if you ask me. So let's edit it together. So the first thing you're going to notice is that it is a single pane instead of dual pane, where on the left we had Markdown and on the right we had a preview of what it would look like, which always wasn't perfectly accurate, to be honest. But yeah, let's revamp this guy and make it a little bit better. First thing, let's add a title. You'll notice that we have multiple different options for headings, as opposed to before we had heading or not heading. You can now have subheadings. Pretty cool. Let's call it pets. Another cool thing is that we have this handy dandy little rich text editor right here when you highlight something. So I'll make that bold. We also still support keyboard shortcuts. So if I do Command I, we can make that italics, for example. And then another cool thing that I'd like to highlight for everyone is that we now support full screen viewing and editing of the documentation of any asset. So let's edit the rest of this here in the full screen mode. I don't know about you, but plain text, a little boring. So let's add an image here. I saved this image URL over here. So let me get that for you guys. And save it. Wow, absolutely adorable. However, way too big. Another new feature is that we support resizing of images, which we did not before. And that makes using images in documentation so much better. And these guys really spruce up our documentation, if you ask me. Now on to my favorite, I think, new feature with this new editor is the ability to mention any entity in DataHub right here in Docs. So for example, in this case, let's say I know that this pets table is used by the weekly adoption projection Explore. Explore, all you have to do is @ symbol. I'll start typing. And then we get all the options. I'm going to select this one. And after you select it, you can hover and you can now see that we have a little like hover tooltip. I can go to it and open up a new tab, see a preview of that documentation, some tags, there'll be ownership if it's there, all that sort of good stuff. So that's pretty great. Like I said, this exists for any entity in DataHub. So that's like data sets, charts, explorers, users, glossary terms, anything. It's pretty great. So I'm pretty excited about that one, obviously. Another thing that I'll show you guys, and sorry if I just keep rolling here, there's just so many features and so little time, is a new and improved code block editor. So now we have special syntax highlighting for pretty much any language that you could think of. It's very widely, covers a large array. So let's say I want to write some SQL. We can have specific syntax for SQL. Pretty cool. All right, and then also we still support the same functionality that we had before in our previous editor. So all the same stuff, bold, italic, underline, strike through, ordered lists, unordered lists, code blocks, links. But something new is now we support tables in our editor. So let me fill this out for you guys just to give you an idea of what it might look like. Yep, we're going to talk about dogs and we're going to talk about cats. I think we all agree that both are cute. All right, so I think that's pretty good. I'll save this and just show you guys what it looks like in the full screen. Go back. And I think that's pretty good for my demo. Let me go back to these slides over here. Cool. So when will this be available? The new editor is already merged and currently on head. So you guys might have noticed I was on the demo site right there for the demo that I was giving. So you can feel free to go check it out yourself. But it will be available in our next release. Also, finally, for anyone hoping to make a larger contribution and wanting to collaborate with the core team, please reach out to Maggie to see if it's something that makes sense to work on together, and then we can facilitate next steps. And that's it for me. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Chris. I think we can all agree that both cats and dogs are cute.
No doubt.
I love that I have successfully infiltrated this group to have all mentions of, or like all examples are centered around cute dogs. It makes me so happy. Okay, let's keep going. Chris, there are a couple of questions in chat. Please take a look there. Let's head on over to our last section. We're going to be focusing on ways in which we are simplifying DataHub. So Pedro, I'm going to start off with you. I believe you're sharing your screen, correct?
Yep, I'm doing it right now.
Sounds great.
All right. So folks, let me just kill a few things out of my. All right. Can you see my presentation?
I sure can.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much. So for everyone who has been in the previous town hall, you may recall that we had a sneak peek related to this feature. We didn't get to present at that time, but I did record a video for it. This is going to be just a completion of that presentation. So for folks that don't know, one of the things that we are looking for is to remove Schema Registry entirely as an external component to DataHub. And the reason why we want to do this is because it's a highly requested community ask. It reduces operational overhead. It unlocks some of our adopters, particularly because it removes the need for a Confluent license to be able to deploy DataHub in production in certain scenarios. So that will no longer be the case. And as a future bonus, it opens the way for DataHub to actually become a full-on complete Schema Registry replacement. That's something that could be built in the future. It depends on where we want to take this effectively. So for this feature in particular, what we're focusing on is just for internal usage, which means that we just want to give DataHub's internal Kafka producers and consumers knowledge on how to process the internal messages from within DataHub itself. As DataHub is, for all intents and purposes, a metadata store, this makes, in our mind, perfect sense to do. And how do we want to do it? From an implementation perspective, what we're going to do for full backwards compatibility is to partially, and the keyword here is partially, implement Confluent's Open API spec for the Schema Registry. And there is a link in this presentation for anyone who's interested. I can share it out, but I think we shared the slides afterwards, so you'll have the link anyway. And this means that there is absolutely no need to implement custom serializers and deserializers. So it's just a plop-in replacement. We just take out Schema Registry as an external component and things should just work. That's the gist of it. However, this initial version is not meant to be a fully compliant Schema Registry implementation, and it is only for DataHub's internal messaging formats. That's something that we can look to into the future, as I said, naturally subject to change. From an architectural perspective, what this looks like is if you take, for instance, the ingest proposal flow of data, which is the typical one when you want to push data into DataHub, is you have some event with metadata. Under the hood, this will call an ingest proposal endpoint, which generates a metadata change proposal event that we store into Kafka, and then that gets processed by our MAE consumers, which will update DataHub's databases, which then allows you to actually search and see things in the UI. Obviously, in these two blue code blocks, there is a direct dependency on the registry. Every single time that you need to read data or write data into Kafka for DataHub, you would have that requirement. This was an external component, which now it isn't. It's actually part of GMS itself. But let me make it more visible for you guys. So demo time. Praying to the demo gods that this works. What I'm going to do is run Docker Quick Start. This is a very particular version because it's still a work in progress. But you will see, and I actually have my images here. I don't know if this is very small or not. So let me actually zoom this in. You'll see we have front end, an actions pod, GMS, Kafka, the setup jobs for MySQL and Elasticsearch, MySQL, Zookeeper, and Elasticsearch. So no Schema Registry here. I'm not lying to anybody. I'm not running anything else. This is everything that I have in my terminal. So let's just give it a minute for these images to be loaded up. This shouldn't really take very long. So let's just give it a little minute here. And I will show you how this will open up in the browser. So let's not yet up, just front end. So just giving here one quick minute. If anyone has any questions at this time, feel free to post them in chat and I will look into them. Okay, here we go. DataHub is completely deployed. Again, no registry here. That's an old version, sorry. There's nothing here. So allow me to log in into DataHub. As you see, we have a completely clean slate instance. There's absolutely nothing running here. So let me run just an ingest action, which everybody should be able to run directly from their CLI. This will load up some data into DataHub. So if I refresh this page, here we go. We actually have data loading in. One thing to note is that as part of this PR, the way that we actually implemented this, because it's using the OpenAPI spec, you will now see some more endpoints on our Swagger documentation. And this is all exactly what we have on Confluent side. So yeah, that's effectively it from the demo. Now, when and how can you use it? The PR is still a work in progress. We're trying to do a tentative release mid-February. So this should be coming in the next release, hopefully. It will come enabled by default on all quick start deployments. For Kubernetes, this will be locked behind some environment variables, but we will be releasing documentation with this for anybody who wants to try it out. For now, because this feature is so new, we do suggest keeping the regular Schema registry deployment mode, at least in production, for at least one release whilst we have time to mature this feature. And that's it, Maggie, from my side.
Amazing. I know there are a ton of folks in the community that have been eagerly awaiting this. So Pedro, thank you for your persistent work on it. Thank you to the full platform team, Ryan and David on the Acryl side for really just pushing this through. I know it's been an undertaking, to say the least, and very excited for us to make some serious progress on it. All right, Shirshanka and Harshal, we are going to continue in our conversation, our theme around simplifying DataHub. Oops. Shirshanka?
All right, I'm back. So this is for all of you people who live on the terminal and die by the SDK, you know. So this is like extreme developer edition. Our goal with DataHub is always to provide data practitioners with the highest fidelity metadata graph backed by a highly scalable, battle-tested storage and indexing platform. And I've written about this, as when I wrote about the evolution of metadata architectures over the years, based on my personal experience building metadata systems and observing other systems that had, succeeded or not quite succeeded in kind of the sphere. Usually you start out with kind of a generation 1 architecture. Probably you hack it over a weekend, start out with pull-based integration, crawl whatever you can get, ingest it into some local DB, and you start getting productive very quickly. Then you realize, well, I have to share it with other people in my team, in my organization, and you move into generation 2, a microservice-based architecture with a DB behind it. And then as you really want to scale it out to the entire organization and really want to enable decoupled production and consumption of metadata, you end up going towards what I'd call generation 3, which is an event-oriented stream-based architecture with extensible metadata modeling. And that's where DataHub is right now, right? It has basically evolved over multiple generations to get to kind of this extremely scalable, extremely decoupled way of producing and consuming metadata. Interestingly, one of the consequences of all of this evolution and these technical choices that we've made is that it can feel overly complex to get that first use case off the ground. And we are always looking to make DataHub easier to use. DataHub Quick Start is obviously our lightest weight deployment of DataHub. And as Pedro just shared, we're looking for more and more ways to simplify it and give you the entire DataHub stack on your laptop, right? We used to require 8 gigs of memory, and now we're like at 6 gigs. And now with the Schema registry going away, we'll probably have to shave off a little bit of that. We're looking to upgrade Kafka, and that will get Zookeeper out of the mix. And that's climbing that hill and making it simpler and easier continuously. And the telemetry tells us that we see routinely, upwards of 400, almost close to 500 quick starts per day that are happening across multiple laptops like Linux and Windows and Mac, which means, we've achieved some amount of scale, some amount of adoption. We've managed to make this small enough that people can run this locally. The DataHub CLI itself is one of the most highly used Python packages in the world. I mean, in the top 1%. There's a lot of SDK calls, and Ada just shared how she is starting to use DataHub as an SDK and use it to enrich metadata and work with metadata. But we're always looking for opportunities to push this envelope further. And in this space, there have been, in the industry, a lot of attempts to provide metadata at the fingertips of data professionals on the command line. There were projects like Whale that came up a few years ago, and more recently, Recap, that's trying to do exactly that. And as we looked at those attempts, we felt like that was an experiment worth trying for the DataHub community, to provide them with a slimmed down SDK and a CLI experience with metadata that didn't really require them to deploy all of the DataHub components. As you know, most of the hard parts about metadata, one of the biggest hard parts is the integration complexity of integrating with every single thing known to mankind, and then being able to explore that metadata in a lightweight way. So imagine you're a data scientist who's just joined a company and hasn't yet deployed a central data catalog like DataHub, but you still want to be able to discover and understand data while staying on the command line. So how can we take advantage of all of these integrations that DataHub already has? How can we take advantage of the comprehensive metadata model that DataHub already has, and yet make it really easy and really lightweight to get access to all of this metadata? That was something that we've been noodling on for quite a bit of time, actually. Something that isn't a separate island and still has the ability to connect up with the central DataHub instance when that becomes available. So if you think about journey of DataHub at a company, you might start out in sort of single player mode and then move as you graduate to multiplayer mode, where multiple teams are collaborating and harnessing all of that metadata for each other. Now, the good news is, while this seems very hard, it's actually not. It's not a ton of work. And we're very excited to actually introduce it as an experimental project for community feedback. And Harshal, I think, is going to give you a quick tour of this newest addition to the DataHub SDK.
Yeah, thanks. So I think let me share my screen and we can kick off a little demo. So first off, what is DataHub Lite? Broadly, the idea was, let's build a small embedded version of DataHub that you can use only from the CLI, or primarily from the CLI. And the data storage basically lives in a DuckDB file on your machine. Very quick to use and work with, and then you can do exploration based on it. You can write scripts based on it. You can do kind of more like quick things that you can do without requiring a full DataHub instance. So it exists right now as a subcommand of DataHub. So generally you can initialize it, then you can import some data in. The other thing that you can do is actually, if you have existing recipes, you can just set DataHub Lite as the sink, and we'll just use the local thing. If you want to both keep a copy of that data locally as well as forward it to an actual running instance of GMS, you can do that as well. So you can basically mirror the metadata between your local and the remote instance. Anyway, I've actually already run the ingest script, so we can just actually get to exploring stuff. So we have, a file-based system where you can kind of explore your metadata. You can say like Snowflake databases, instances, and maybe it's databases. We can list the databases that we have in Snowflake. That's pretty cool that we have one right now. And then maybe you can list the schemas within this thing. So similar to what you would want to do is kind of a quick exploration of what do you have in Snowflake. Maybe you're a new employee at a company and you're just trying to explore what metadata or what data you have available to you. As part of that, maybe you want to do a get command, and you want to get the documentation on the analytics schema within here. And so we can do that with just a simple get command. And then it will tell us like, okay, if I want to look at it in Snowsite, here's the link to it. If I want the description, here's what we had annotated on it. And then similarly, I can list the tables within this schema. And we've got 260 something tables, and we can take a peek inside of one of them. So we're back to pets as the example, and you can see kind of all of the metadata that our connectors already are able to extract just kind of very quickly. But of course, this is a little bit hard to consume because there's a lot of stuff here. So maybe if you want to just get the schema, we have a sub command for that. And it tells you here are all the column types. Every single one of them is nullable. And then I can just tax -- stats on the end, and I can get some basic summary statistics about what are the minimum, maximum, some sample values, how many things are null. Information that you very much need when you're beginning an exploration process with any sort of data. Of course, beyond that, maybe you also want to understand who is using this thing. And so you can run a get command, look at the usage statistics, and then here you can kind of understand, here's how people query it, here's who queries it. And then based on this information, or even which columns are frequently queried, based on this information, you can then, as your new data scientist at a company, start building out charts, building out dashboards, building intermediate models based on this information. And that it's used by other people, who to ask questions to. You can kind of navigate this stuff fairly quickly. There's a couple other capabilities, things like search across this entire metadata graph that you can also do locally. But really, the idea is to test things out. This is an experiment to see kind of what people can actually do with this. And so we're very, very excited to see what you build, what you do with this. And so yeah, excited about this one. So yeah, that's the demo.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. As I jinxed us at the beginning, we do not have time for Q&A allotted. That being said, we will always stick around if you guys want to stay on and chat IRL, or we can take things offline. But thank you all for your time and your attention. We truly, truly, genuinely appreciate you coming to join us in these sessions. They're always the highlight of our month. And stay tuned. I will be sure to post in Slack recording once it's loaded to YouTube. We'll also link out to our deck and any of the associated resources that we had mentioned today. So thank you all very much. We'll stick around if you have any questions, but otherwise, have a wonderful afternoon. I hope you all have a great remainder of your January, and we'll see you next time.